Welcome back to another episode of From the Trenches, which is a show where myself and my Plan First Wealth colleague James Boyle get together to bring you behind the curtain at Plan First Wealth to share with you our thoughts and opinions on what's going on in the world, to provide some technical information useful to Brits in America maybe, to help them thrive here, and finally to bring insights and observations from our life and work. Hello, James.
Hello, Richard. How's it going?
Still mildly angry. I've just, as you know, snapped a green screen in trying to put it down for the first time, and it's really annoyed me.
We should release that footage as special content, right on the.
Well, I should have put it in another room because I'm looking at the broken, twisted carcass of my brand new green screen right next to me on the floor here, and it's like a reminder of my incompetence, and I should get rid of it.
For the listeners at home, this is one of those. They're almost like fabric. A giant disc that then folds down on itself in some strange physics-defying, engineered manner, and you put that to pasture, I think.
And I literally, as I was saying, how when you're doing these things, you're impressed with the engineering feat, but then you're frustrated in the moment because you can't remember how to do it, and then snap. As I was saying, it went in my hand. So. Back to the drawing board, or rather, back to Amazon.
I was going to say, you could check the Amazon description, and I bet somewhere on there they describe it as unbreakable or.
And it'd be remiss of me not to say it before we get going, but happy birthday, James.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We're recording on your birthday. What an honor.
It is.
What commitment to our clients and fans and listeners that we're bringing you all this British content to help you thrive in America on James's birthday.
This is the best gift I could ask for. So happy to be here.
Answer. What a great answer. Okay, right. So what's on the docket today, my friend?
Well, we'll start off with our economy and markets overview. A lot has happened, and for the listeners, we're recording this on the morning of September 11th. 1 week before this will go out. So CPI data has just released this morning. CPI rose 0.2% for the month of August, which is in line with expectations, puts the 12-month rate at 2.5%. I think the market's going to have a bit of a...
12-month at 2.5?
2.5%.
For reasons that will become clear later in this episode, I have not been checking my news this morning, other than when I first woke up to see what went on with the debate. So I did not know that, but 2.5% year over year.
2.5 headline.
On so many levels. Thank goodness, from a business perspective and client perspective, that we're just, the economy it's unremarkable we got down from 9% so quickly. From a personal perspective, just thank goodness, because the cost of living here it's just exploded. It's insane. We're all feeling it every single day. So thank goodness.
The one thing to keep in mind too is that I don't know if anyone expected this to happen. Now, obviously, moving forward, anything could come up, right? There's going to be fears of recession or slowdown, but as of this moment, it does appear that we've achieved. You put up the umbrella of a soft landing on it. It feels like we're in it right now. Touch wood. Now, obviously, that it's all of a lagging effect.
James, I think I said this last time. I think we're at the crunch time. So, and they've done phenomenally well thus far. But it's that whole thing with the flight. The most dangerous times, the takeoff and the landing. And they were late to the party, but I think now we're at the when they were late to put interest rates up, and I think now we're at the landing phase. Interest rates are going to start coming down. We believe, everyone believes. And if they can do this without crashing the economy, then I think they can say we've achieved it. It's remarkable we've avoided the recession thus far, but I do think we're at a crunch period.
Speaking of the Fed, because I think that's kind of the next important point, there was some hope potentially prior to this CPI release amongst traders and Wall Street types that maybe we would be looking at an aggressive cut here at the next Fed meeting, which as of this release date will be happening, the FOMC on September 18th. I would hazard a guess that core CPI, which came in slightly above estimates this morning, 0.3 versus 0.2, that may douse some of those hopes of the more aggressive rate cut, 50 basis points as opposed to 25. So we'll see. I mean, time will tell. The Fed will be knocking their heads together, I'm sure. Job openings last week fell, but the U.S. is still adding jobs, 142,000 jobs added in August. So the unemployment rate did actually decline slightly.
What a weird time we're living in. It's still, it feels like the pandemic was so long ago, but all this is, we're still in a pandemic economy, or
Absolutely.
the results of a pandemic economy. And I think we will be for years. It was such a huge seismic event in the economy, and not just the economy, in our lives. You know, the way we go about our lives has changed irrevocably as a result of that.
Yeah, I don't think it will ever go back fully.
No.
It's one of those things, too, that the long-term effects can't be known until 5, 10, 15, 20 years. You know, we always talk about the long term here, but we may not know how the pandemic impacted things until 20, 40. Imagine that. We're almost over 4 years on now, but
yeah, wild. Yeah, wild times. Well, that's good news. So economy's doing well. Inflation is up but down. It's heading towards its long-term goal. We think interest rates are going to start coming down. Maybe not super aggressively, but on the way down, which is going to be great for everyone, great for the housing market. And all is well. Again, touch wood, please, but all seems to be going well.
Yep, layoffs have stayed depressed. It's, there's no immediate red flags, I would say. I mean, obviously, these things are touch and go, as you say, and there will be revisions to come, and we'll see what the Fed says next week. But as of right now, we're looking okay.
Maybe I'm wrong, but it does feel a bit jittery at the moment. Like we had another pullback last week, and every time we seem to we do these once a month. Every time we seem to have this conversation, in the last month there seems to have been some sort of a mild panic, mild temporary panic. It just seems everyone's kind of like on edge, almost ready, just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Is the market feeling toppy? We'll see. It's one of those things that we certainly wouldn't act on it, but it's worth keeping an eye on. And
obviously Nvidia's it's just everywhere you turn right now. And I think there's the remarkable run of Nvidia, but then there's also the kind of, now people are saying, as they inevitably do, it's gone too far, it's got to pull back, and if that crashed, it would affect the market. So I think a lot of the time it's not what's going on in the market, it's people reacting to or preparing for what they think is going to happen that really drives stocks in the market. So I think there's some of that going on.
Exactly. The AI conversation was, we revisited that this week with Apple, the Apple event too, which I'm an Apple user. I know you are too, Richard. A lot of our listeners, I'm sure, the new models that will have, what are they calling it? Apple Intelligence, right? AI will be baked into the whole ecosystem. So, as a user, as a consumer, it's exciting to see what it can do. Is it going to help the bottom line? That remains to be seen, I think.
So next thing we're going to talk about is we're going to do reflect back on some of our other podcast episodes. So I recently concluded a 3-part estate planning series, if you like, cross-border US-UK estate planning series, one with a UK attorney, one with a US attorney, and I thought there was a lot of information in there, of information, and I thought maybe we could just spend a few minutes reflecting on that and maybe bring it into how this manifests itself for us on a daily basis in the conversations we have with our prospective clients and our clients. So I don't know if you have any immediate thoughts on that.
Well, before we dive in, I would say if you're listening to this episode and you haven't listened to those, the 2 with Aidan Grant of Collier Bristow, then the 3rd with Paula Jones of Jones Estate Group, certainly go back, and after you've heard us kind of reflect on it, go back and listen to those. There is a ton of enormously valuable content in there. And like Richard said, we're going to kind of do a highlight here and talk about what it means in practicality, but there is a lot of information in there that I think certainly listeners of this podcast would benefit from enormously.
Well, James, I'll tell you what, shall I just set the scene a bit more even? So I had Aidan on originally because Aidan's a UK-based cross-border estate planning attorney. He's actually American by birth, although he's since renounced it. And I wanted to get Aidan on because I wanted him to talk about domicile. Well, we talked about many things, but one of the main things was domicile, this concept of Brits who come here, for the most part, are domiciled in the UK and will be for a long time, and it can be a very hard thing to shed, and it can have real consequences when you're setting up a US estate plan. And I wanted Aidan to come in and talk about that concept and the pitfalls to be avoided, and You know, if I can pick one, he shared so many nuggets. We had to split it for the first time ever. We had to split the podcast into two parts because there's so much good stuff in there, all about the concept of domicile, the repercussions, the living trusts, and all this great stuff. And he also is under the caveat that the UK government is currently looking at this centuries-old concept of domicile and might be making changes to it. And if they do, and they affect our clients, we'll have him back on to talk about those changes. But of all the things he shared, the one thing that stayed with me the most is the way he positioned estate planning for Brits in America. And I think we all have a tendency, those of us who are aware of this, to overcomplicate it and fret and worry. And he just basically said, when you're doing estate plans, for anyone, there are a number of doors. You're in a corridor and you have a number of doors to choose from. You know, and based on your personal situation and what you're trying to achieve, you will advise a client to go through a particular door. When it comes to Brits in America and Americans in Europe, you still have options, good options. You just have fewer doors to go through. And I thought that's a wonderfully, that takes really takes some of the sting, some of the fear out of it. You know, rather than having 8 doors, you've got 4. That's not a bad thing. But the thing to be really aware of is behind those 3 or 4 doors that you shouldn't walk through, there are some really nasty and unexpected and expensive repercussions. And I think the biggest bugbear for all of us in this is people will walk through those wrong doors before seeking appropriate advice or going to see someone who isn't aware that there's this concept, you know, of British domicile or whatever, and they walk through the wrong door, and then they speak to someone like us, and we're aware of this, and it's after the fact. So it's trying to promote just fewer options, not necessarily worse options, just fewer options, but just make sure you don't walk through the wrong doors. So I really, really enjoyed that part with Aidan. And then I had Paula on because Paula is a US-based cross-border international estate planning attorney. And we talked about loads of good stuff again. Especially we got into the weeds about inheritance tax at the state level, which I hadn't even talked about with Aidan. But the reason I wanted Paula on was because I believe I started talking about cross-border US-UK estate plans, and it just freaks clients out. They're thinking, I've got to pay a US attorney, and that US attorney is going to be a cross-border specialist. That's going to be super expensive. Oh, and then they're going to want to go and get a British lawyer involved. Oh, and if I got property in another country, I'm going to have to get another lawyer involved. And they're just seeing dollar signs and pound signs in front of their eyes, and it's terrifying. It's going to cost me $30,000 to get an estate planning. What's the point? So they don't do anything, or they go and see the wrong person. And I wanted Paula to come on to talk through the actual mechanics, what she does with clients in the US with these needs, and how it doesn't have to be a break the bank process or experience in order to get a solid cross-border estate plan in place that protects you and your heirs, your family.
That idea is so key. I think, you know, being on the ground, so to speak, speaking with people every day, it's overwhelming, right? It feels overwhelming. It feels like this huge mountain that you have to climb. And I think Paula's episode, as you mentioned, was so illustrative of the fact that it shouldn't be this enormous weight weighing on you. There are options, to use Aidan's metaphor. There are doors available to you. Don't put off taking action thinking that it's going to be massively expensive or just mentally overbearing, right? That it feels like this insurmountable challenge. There are people in this space that do exactly this for people just like you, the listener, to ensure that at the end of the day, your money is going to your family or to the charities or to the organizations that you want it to.
And if you can, you're not going to get stuck in a costly and time-consuming probate purgatory process. Mm-hmm. And so I think the financial aspect of it is something that overwhelms people. And I think you touched on it a minute ago. It's also the network. So I actually talk about someone I spoke to recently. They're in California, and everything's more difficult in California. So they've got federal, state, UK. They've got a property in France. You know, they're still both working. They're thinking, I've got to find a US lawyer who understands federal California. I've got to find someone in the UK. I've got to find someone in France. I've then got to have it all joined up. Like, where do you even start? And the answer is, it's practically impossible. One of the things that I have learned I've been doing this nearly 10 years now in the US. One of my most valuable offerings to clients, and it's free of charge, is my network. Is I know where to go when you need a UK-US cross-border tax advisor, tax attorney, estate planning attorney. And I'll be leveraging Paula's network. I don't know where to go for a French attorney. She does. And it's this cross-border thing, you need professionals, and you need cross-border professionals, and they need to have good networks. And if you can do that, that's how you win at this.
Yep. The other thing I think you and Paula touched on, and speaking of this, the idea of having properties in multiple different countries, the world is getting smaller, right? People work remotely, people are traveling more, people have houses, real estate in different areas, certainly the people that we talk to. So there is infrastructure available. It may not feel like that at the onset, right? But this is becoming more and more common. There are ways to navigate these issues such that it's not, again, this enormous burden, and to make sure that the right steps are taken. We have plenty of clients. I mean, obviously we have clients worldwide, right? Most in the US, a not insignificant chunk back in the UK, and some in mainland Europe or beyond. There are ways to navigate this no matter what path you take in the future or are planning to potentially take.
But you really do, especially if you're a US citizen, you absolutely need professionals. Trying to go this alone, I accept that for regular Brits in Britain and regular Americans in America, it's possible. Do I think it's necessarily the right thing to do or the smartest thing to do? Probably not, but I absolutely understand it's possible. To do this as a cross-border person, and even in a cross-border person in a third jurisdiction, just no chance. Don't even go there.
You're effectively making a decision, and maybe this comes off as too dismissive, but you're making a decision that at that stage, whoever I'm leaving my assets to, I'm understanding they are going to have an absolute swamp to cross upon my passing.
and not even, I know we're talking about estate planning, but not even just estate planning. Like if you try and do that without a good cross-border tax advisor, you're going to create a nightmare for yourself to handle as well.
Yep. We talk about the landmines, and they abound, right? You want to make sure you have the right professionals in place to navigate around them. So
if anyone, I hope there's lots of Brits listening to this, Brits in America, Brits thinking of coming to America. Honestly, anyone with a cross-border, especially Paula's episode, anyone from outside the US, living in the US, check out these three podcasts. It's just a wealth of information.
One piece too that I wanted to make sure we jump on before we move on here. Real estate, just having a property in the UK and being a US person can create complications. Not these enormous insurmountable challenges, but it creates complications from everything as basic as legal documents, right? Wills, power of attorney, but also the contradiction and interaction of those legal documents. So many of our clients, many of the people we talk to have real estate abroad, right? Speaking outside of the US now, have a home in the UK. Yeah. Maybe they're going to spend significant time there in retirement. Maybe they're renting it out. If that applies to you, that is reason enough alone to speak to a cross-border estate professional, because that in and of itself can cause complications. All of these things, so much of the content we put out, so much of the work we do is designed to get people to realize that the US is somewhat unique in the way they tax and assess tax on worldwide income and assets. And also that just by being an expat in the States with any ties to foreign assets, real estate, you automatically do not have a simple lifestyle or scenario.
James, let's be clear. This podcast has grown out of two things. One, over the last 10 years, I've learned so much. Mm-hmm. And Frank, a lot of it is idiosyncratic, terrifying, unfair, ridiculous. I've learned so much. And second of all, in 10 years, I realize how little people know, myself included when I first started. And 10 years on, people still don't really know, even though it's all over the internet and stuff now. So this podcast, part of it is the mission is to try and get this information out there. Mm-hmm. I can only have so many one-on-one conversations. And only so much lands in a one-on-one conversation. And I don't have all the answers or all the knowledge. So a lot of this podcast is about getting that information out there as a permanent record with true experts, which people can go back to again and again and again. and hopefully spread this information, because what I would love to see is my next 10 years. I would love it if when people come to us, we do less spotting and diagnosing problems and suggesting solutions and more preemptive, preventative stuff. I would love that.
Yep. That's the mission.
Yeah, that's the mission. Help Brits thrive here. That's the mission. Well, you know, otherwise, why'd you come here? We come here to America. Yeah, if you want quality of life, people go to Europe. If you come to America because it's America, right? You come here to make it, and I don't want people to jeopardize that by making understandable but avoidable mistakes and missteps.
Absolutely.
Moving on.
Great. We have quite the adventure here. I think adventure maybe is too optimistic of a term. I'll let you take it away.
Right. Well, and this is why I didn't see the CPI print come in this morning. So last time we met, we talked about we issued a warning about scams, and in that, since that we recorded that and dropped that podcast, it turns out it looks like I might be the victim of identity theft, or attempted identity theft, I should say. So. I'll try and keep this brief, but on Labor Day, I get a notification on my phone, and someone's applying for credit cards, store cards, Target, Home Depot in my name, and yeah, this then sets off a furious. I'll lay out what steps I've taken shortly, but this then has stepped off a process. I've had letters from these companies talking about my applications, and today I called up. Both these organisations to report this was not me. Turns out someone's out there with my name, my address, my social security number, my telephone number, a fake Gmail account for me.
Terrifying.
Yep. And someone's got some form of ID. For one of them was done in person, and someone will have submitted ID. So unless it's someone on the inside there, someone will have submitted some form of ID. And the other one, they quoted, are these the last 4 digits of your driving license? No. So either someone's got a fake driving license, or I don't know, but someone's out there pretending to be me applying for credit in my name.
The initial, this is terrifying. For listeners, we didn't pay someone to run through this, and this is a true story. We didn't. This just dovetailed.
Well, James, as I said to James at the start, it's like someone listened to our last episode and thought, do you know what? These boys need some content.
I'll
give them some content.
It's all about content now.
I'll steal their identities or one of their identities, and then let's see what they do in response.
So lucky you got chosen here as the content creator, but that initial red flag, was that Credit Karma? How were you notified originally, or was that a credit card?
I got an email from Credit Karma, and it said you've had 2 new credit checks or credit application checks on your Equifax or TransUnion. And I was like, oh, that's not me. So I went into my Credit Karma, and lo and behold, right then and there, that day, 2 credit checks have been made. And there was little I could do. It was Labor Day, and I wonder if that was intentionally on Labor Day, so no it was open. Mm-hmm. But I got through to places, and it turned out there was no open cards. But there were applications, because I started getting letters the following week. And that's kicked off a load more activity today.
So this idea that they have ID, that came from one of the application. Okay.
Well, one of the applications, she said it was done in person, and they will have shown some ID. So I guess that could mean there's someone on the inside there, right? I don't know. But the other one, she said to me, "Do you have a Gmail address?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "What is it?" Told her my Gmail address. She said, "That's not the one we have." And then she said, "What's your what are the last 4 digits of you?" She gave me the last 4 digits of my driving license and said, "Is this the last 4 digits of your driving license?" I went and looked, and they weren't. So, and then we corroborated other information, and lots of it was correct, but a few things were incorrect. So,
it's terrifying. It's one of those things where you almost have to behave as if your information is out there, right? Assume that your information is in the hands of bad actors, and what are the steps you can take then to be preventative, be proactive, and make sure that if something were to happen, you can jump on it as quickly as possible.
Well, I should also mention someone has been trying to hack one of my email addresses. I don't want to mention which one, but someone has been trying to hack one of my email addresses.
This is a personal email.
Yeah. So I'm on the... Let me tell people what I've done. So immediately as and let me also just preface by saying I was kind of alert about this because one of our clients suffered identity theft in a big way. This person somehow managed to change their telephone number over to them, somehow managed to get a driving license in their name. FBI were involved. I mean, it's a really big deal. So I had lots of conversations with this client about the steps they took and things that are differently. So I was slightly prepared with what to do. Here's what I did. So the moment that I got the notification, I set up an account with Norton LifeLock. So Norton Antivirus, they also have this service called LifeLock where they can monitor. I'm not entirely sure what they do. My client used this LifeLock and said they were a game changer for him. They helped him get his life back, essentially. So I immediately signed up with Norton LifeLock and make sure and I've raised a case with them, and now they're just monitoring what's going on. If anyone pulls credit in my name, if any suspicious goes on. So hopefully there's a third party watching stuff in my name out there. And also I think it comes with an element of insurance. If any of these attempts succeed, I think there's an element of insurance in there. So I opened an account with Norton LifeLock. From that, through Norton, I then went and put a credit freeze on my credit. The Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, I've put a credit freeze. So anyone who now tries to pull a credit report can't pull a credit report. I also raised a fraud alert with them. So if anyone does do that, it should notify the retailer that there's a fraud alert on this person's account. And that's what I did originally. And then today, after I called these cards and found out all this other stuff was going on, it was worse than I thought. I visited identitytheft.gov, and that's a site where you can get tips and tricks on how to monitor this, and also if there is a successful breach, I think you can raise a case and stuff. I'm not there yet, but I'm following the tips and tricks, and I updated Norton LifeLock with this other information was out there about me, and I have gone on a service called Delete Me. Delete Me is a service where you put in all your information, and they will go out there and find and contact data brokers and the dark web, and also LifeLock does that. They're monitoring what's on the dark web, and they will try and get you all your information. They'll come back to you with a report and waiting on a report with all the information that's out there about you, who holds it. And I get the impression it's going to be quite a sobering read. And then they'll help you delete it all. So I've got LifeLock monitoring what's in the dark web. I've got Delete Me trawling through to find out what's out there for sale on me and my wife and get it all deleted. And then I'm just checking my Credit Karma constantly. And I'm changing passwords, setting up two-factor authentication, just batting down the hatches, so to speak. It's a violation. It's a horrible feeling.
It is. I was going to say that. It's almost like, if someone ever broke into your car or your apartment, hopefully that never happens, but you feel violated, like, someone's in your space. I mean, this is digital, but it's as real as anything else. It's a shame. First of all, sorry that you're going through that.
Weirdest thing happened to me around Christmas time living in Manchester. I must have left my car unlocked, but someone went into my car, and nothing was stolen, but a bottle of wine was left behind. A nice bottle, or I still remember what it was. I can't. It's a Rioja that everyone drinks in the UK, and they have a purple label is the most expensive one, and it's not expensive. It's like £10 a bottle, and they have a yellow label one, and it was a yellow label of this famous Rioja. I can't remember Marquis something. Everyone in the UK will know this bottle of wine on site. And I don't know if they'd been disturbed or what, but there was a bottle of wine in my driver's seat. And the door was slightly ajar. That's how I knew someone had been in my car. My passenger side door was ajar, and I went in fearing bad things. And there was a bottle of red wine, red wine Rioja on my passenger seat.
Were there any like tasting notes scribbled on the bottle? This is
no. This is not that kind of. It is not worth it. This is not worth it. This
better
is
than a bottle of
Rioja
Buckfast.
Yes, yeah. So that's the only time I've had my space violated.
It is violating. Yeah, I think that's true. And sorry you're going through that. You had a injury in the summer, and now you have this to deal with. But it sounds like you've taken all the steps you can, right? And then it's monitoring. And
at this stage, I'm quite comfortable. It's probably the wrong word. It's deeply uncomfortable knowing someone's out there with your social security number and a fake Gmail account. But I was alerted straight away. I've taken all the steps that I've been told to. I'm monitoring it. I'm aware of it. The problem with our client was that he found out very much after the fact. I'm kind of learning from his experience, and everything worked out well for him in the end. It was a horrible experience, but everything worked out well for him in the end. I hope I've caught it quick enough. But be careful out there, folks. Scams have exploded.
Absolutely, and there's nothing you can do really but be vigilant and take the steps you can. And then if something seems suspicious, you like you've done, jump on it and lock things down, batten down the hatches.
Yeah.
Well, we'll keep the listeners updated because I'm sure people want to know how it turns out next episode.
Yeah.
Now for pick a mix here, I have there is this boy band called Oasis that I've never heard of them, but apparently they're touring. Any interest in getting in the waiting lines or anything for one of those shows?
Yes and no. So I obviously as a child of that generation and from Manchester or near Manchester, I'm an Oasis fan, particularly early Oasis. I've been to an Oasis concert and all that entails. And I'm really, really intrigued to see if it's going to be like that still or not, because it was an experience. Anyone who's been to an Oasis concert or aware of what goes on at Oasis concerts knows what I'm talking about. But there's some pretty unpleasant stuff that goes down. And it was violent, the one I was at, like really violent. Is it going to be like that?
When and where, if I
was
can
in
ask?
Nottingham. It was my final year of college. And I remember being in... We were standing in the well, I don't know what you call it, in front of the stage. And there were these big, scary skinheads next to us, to our left. And they basically turned left and basically set upon a set of students just like us. And really violent. And then to add insult to injury, the stewards came out and kicked the stewards out, kicked the students out. And I just had one eye on these guys ever since. But if they turned left and sat on these students, they'd turn right and sat on us, we'd they'd have killed us.
And for no apparent reason.
Famously at Oasis, there used to be chucking of urine all over the crowd, like really, really awful stuff. But 20 years is a long time, or nearly 20 years, and it is a different world now. And I like to think that kind of behaviour is not. It was never acceptable then, right? But it somehow the early noughties were a very different time, and one I don't look back on particularly fondly for the kind of culture. And I just don't think that stuff's going to fly now.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, and I really hope. But then we've just had these riots in the UK, so there's still an underbelly of unpleasantness, and I really hope. I'm intrigued to see how these concerts go down, what it's actually like, whether it's a return to that or the world has moved on and we're better for it. But I'm interested to see. But I'm excited Oasis back together. There are a lot of Oasis haters, but I love Oasis.
And hopefully the brothers can. Hopefully the brothers can keep it together and put on some good shows.
I think so. Liam is a different. So Liam Gallagher now is hilarious, right? He's a national treasure.
So funny,
and everyone loves him, as far as I'm aware. But when they got back together, I spent a lot of time on YouTube going back to the old stuff, going down memory lane. And I tell you what, you realise just how kind of vulgar they all were. And now we have this like lovely, cuddly, friendly, funny Liam. But back then, he wasn't really those things, and we've forgotten what that's like. So, so that's also going to be interesting for me to see.
In some ways, it was like this perfect expression of this angst or young people sort of anger, and he was kind of a good, at the time, an accurate representation of that. Now, you obviously are way closer to it than me. That's my American lens.
I think we've got into the habit of apologising for bad behaviour. So when you say like it was an expression of the angst, I'm going to push. I'm going to push back and say no. It was just a manifestation of some of the worst parts of society at that time, and it's like when we make excuse for certain voters now. They're the downtrodden or they're the forgotten parts of the country. No, they're just racist. You got to call a spade at a certain point. Yeah,
no, that's true.
And I kind of. I don't buy into this the angst of the generation. No, they just allow people to behave really badly. And I'm saying this as someone who I love massive Oasis. Kate and I have been listening to the albums on repeat. Love it. They're on all our playlists. But you look back on a different time.
Yeah. I would imagine that. I think to your point, the venue certainly. I mean, they're not playing in arenas down the street. These are massive, massive places that hopefully, if the brothers aren't keeping things in line or their organization, hopefully the venues will.
The reason I went on that rampage about Liam, so I do think they'll keep it together because they are different people now, and Liam in particular has just grown into like someone extremely likable and funny from the limited stuff that I see. So I do think there's a better chance of them. Not, and I also don't think they abused alcohol and drugs the same way they did. On some of this stuff, which obviously causes enormous amounts of trouble. So it's going to be really interesting to see, and I'm glad that they're back because it's a big part of my youth.
Yeah,
but the ticket debacle that caused people got very upset about tickets.
That was and that's an ongoing thing. I actually I don't know how involved they were, but it feels like the ticket monopoly has ruined the experience of purchasing any kind of event or.
Wasn't it always like that? With touts outside and stuff, was it?
So.
I don't know. I don't know.
Call, phone.
I'm not really a big gig person. I wish I was, but I just wasn't really a thing.
They haven't announced US dates, I don't believe, so.
No US dates. So I've just finished reading a book called or on Bernie Madoff. And it's called Bernie Madoff, the final word, by a journalist called Richard Bahar. And this guy had followed Bernie. He got interviews with him in prison and had loads of conversations with him. And obviously the Madoff Ponzi scheme was just such a seismic event. I remember where I was when I heard about it. I was working for Scottish Widows. I was in someone's office. I literally remember someone coming in and mentioning it. And I didn't even know what a Ponzi scheme was at the time. And 15 years on, there's time for reflections and people share more, and he's got Bernie in his own words. It's just really interesting. I learned loads about it. I got different perspectives. And I'd just recommend anyone with an interest in that to read that book. If anyone's got an interest in how Bernie led that life for decades, knowing that it's probably all going to come crumbling down at one point. Like kind of a narcissist. I'll let people make their own minds up on whether Ruth and the kids are involved, but the journalists certainly think so. And are you aware of the whistleblower, Harry Markopoulos or Harry Markle? I'm not sure I can say his name, but
I was going to ask you if is this in some way related to the documentary that came out, or this might be?
It's in no way related.
Yeah.
This guy Harry, whatever his name is, basically is a white knight who tried to save it. But was he the guy that was testifying and was going to, he was writing letters. This journalist says he doesn't deserve that accolade. Said
really?
Yeah, he talks to SEC people who say the information provided would not have led to an investigation normally. I'm not sure because this guy did shout and scream a lot and provide them with information, and it was pretty obvious.
He was not shy.
But most of all. And I should note as well, this guy has his aunt was caught up in the scheme, lost $16 million. Now, not really $16 million. $16 million on paper. The amount she invested was much, much, much lower. And he is scathing on his final verdict is that every single investor. Now, I personally have some sympathy for the feeder funds because they went through big institutions, and I think when you go through big institutions like big banks, there's an extra level of due diligence and liability, and they weren't doing their job, and I have some degree of sympathy there. But certainly the ones who invested directly with Madoff, he takes the opinion that no one is an innocent victim, not one single person. Every single person is either directly complicit at the top. And I believe that. I believe that people at the top who are directly complicit, the biggest investors, and the rest were at best willfully ignorant. And he bases that on
strong stance.
He bases that on the returns and the fact that all the statements were riddled with errors. Now, people said they didn't look at the statements, and I believe that. We all know no one looks at statements. But the point is, we're talking thousands of people and many, many thousands of statements riddled with errors. Like, not one single person at any time picked up on any errors because there was never any complaint to the SEC.
Yeah.
So his point is there's no pure innocence, and it ranges from outright complicit to willfully ignorant. And gotta say, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I'll sign off by saying one thing that staggers me, and I think this gives me some insight into why the IRS are the way they are, is the richest people in this country, the very richest. We're talking hundreds of millionaires and billionaires. How many of them are absolutely committed to evading, not avoiding, evading taxes
at all costs?
At all costs. And I just can't wrap my head around why you would take that from an ideological perspective, but from a personal risk perspective. The arrogance, the cockiness, the thing, but just these are people who just would go to any lengths to avoid paying the IRS, and these are people who had billions.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is.
Because for every story of that you hear about, there's probably 10 that get away with it, unfortunately.
Yeah. So if you got any interest in that, if you're like me, it's like a not a pivotal moment of your career, but one of those where you remember where you were when you learned about Madoff, and you followed it with interest all these years, and you remember the photos from 2008, 2009. It's a trip down memory lane, and there's loads of perspective and insights and information, and it's also a warning. It's a tale of caution. Everyone should read it, honestly.
I wonder if that's the first time that Oasis and Bernie Madoff have been discussed back to back on a podcast. That's us against time. Appreciate everyone listening. We'll be back soon, and certainly to update on Richard's goings on.
Thanks, everyone. Speak to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.